Can we get a sound check for anybody attending virtually? Can you hear us? Yes, great. Thank you. Can one of you say something?
And
You're all muted.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that.
Hi.
Great, thank you. Okay.
I'm gonna step out and listen to it. Make sure it's.
Thank you.
Hey, welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the meeting. Welcome to sure.
I unmuted myself, so I apologize. I'm creating all of the feedback there, so now it's fixed. It's
And now we're really ready to start the meeting. Thanks for dealing with me as we deal with all the technical issues on our end. So thank you so much for joining us here in person and virtually online. Anybody here in person, there is a sign-up sheet on the back counter where you can put your name and email address, park that you're interested in. Parks will slowly be collecting contact information so that we can make sure people who want to be informed about specific playgrounds or parks will be notified. We can send out mass emails that way. If you're online, if you've already contacted the Parks Department, we have your information and the park that you're interested in. If you've never emailed us before, you're always able to send in an email at any time. We'll share all of our contact information at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to formally introduce myself. My name is Sarah Garceau. I am the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Lake Stevens. And I do have two of the Parks and Recreation staff with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves and tell us how long you've been with the department.
I'm David Green. I'm the field supervisor for parks. I've been with city since June.
I'm Jill Neese. I'm the Parks Planning and Development Coordinator, and I've been with the city since just over 8 years, I guess.
Okay, awesome. So ground rules for the meeting. If you are joining us virtually, we ask that you please keep your mic muted. At the very end of the presentation, we're going to open dialogue. We're going to have real conversations. If you have questions, we'll ask you to just raise your hand so we can unmute one at a time and make sure that people aren't talking over each other here at the audience. You can indicate you want to speak by kind of raising your hand, and we'll have you join a mic. If you're on the mic at the podium, then everybody will also be able to catch this online. Okay, awesome. So I am going to dive into the presentation at the end. We'll do question and answers and go from there. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, perfect. And just trying to get rid of that Zoom strip on the side to see if we can hide it. If not, I apologize. Part of the screen will just be cut off. At the end of this presentation, this is all recorded and will be on YouTube. So it can be rewatched. Anybody not joining us in live, they can go in and continue to watch it in case they want to learn information or join the Q&A session in order to see what was discussed. All right, so I want to start off with the Parks and Recreation Department because it's relatively new and I know that a lot of residents don't know what that means. So as of August of, that says 23, I apologize on my edit, but last year, 2022, the Parks and Recreation Department was formally established. So I was hired as the city's first Parks and Recreation Director, and we now do officially have a committed Parks and Recreation Department. So who maintained it before? That's the question that I often get because we've had parks in the cities and a lot of awesome parks. Really, when you don't have a Parks and Recreation department, they're split between two separate departments. So for us, Public Works was in charge of everything out in the field, all of the operation and maintenance. And then the Community Development Department, along with planning, was our administration and recreation. So for instance, Jill was under that department prior, and now she's in the Parks Department. This allows us as a city to ensure that all of our staff are properly trained and really have a focus on parks and recreation and know more about the industry. We're the department that loves working with the public. And so we hope to see a lot of you more often at our meetings. So about our department, we have 10 staff. One of those is myself as director. We have 3 in the administration recreation side. And we have 6 out in the field for operations and maintenance. We also hire 4 seasonal workers this year. We only had 2 last year, but if anybody's looking for a summer job, either part-time or full-time, I'm going to plug that because it's right here. If you live local, you don't have to spend much gas and you can be outside all year. So if you like yard maintenance and you don't mind people, it's a really fun job. What do we maintain? Well, we've been working on one inventory since I've been here. At this time, I am determining we have 28 official parks on city land that are co-managed. Some of them are all city parks and rec managed. Other ones might have partnerships with HOA. There's a property that is owned by the school district, but managed by the city. That's the disc golf property, for instance. And we also have a ball field that the Little League permanently manages their field on. So we've got a lot of different stuff going on within the city. We also have a lot of open space. We have a lot of trails and other vegetation to maintain. We have some properties that will be developed in the future, such as Cedarwood, which has been acquired and will be a future community park. Is that survey still open for Cedarwood or is that closed at this time? Do you know, Jill? It is still open. Last count, we had over 250 survey results. My goal is always 1,000. So spread the word. If you're interested in a community center and want to see something there, go answer our surveys. That's how we know what to build for you, the public. All right, let's get into playgrounds, information, and our parks. Many of you already know why playgrounds and parks are important, but I love to preach about it for people that just don't pause to really take a moment of why. Why are parks important? Well, they bring community together. They attract people to want to live in the city. They promote social interaction, somewhere where you and your family can go and hang out. It's somewhere that, really promotes health and wellness. Being outdoors really increases the quality of life. There's endless amount of benefits, but those are just some highlights. And what about playgrounds? What do playgrounds do for our children or still for us as adults? Well, specifically for children in development, they provide an ample amount of benefit. They provide emotional, social, motor, and cognitive learning. You can see on the screen many other things. But even with health, it can help reduce the risk of diabetes. It can reduce obesity. It teaches us how to have friends. It can teach balance when you're on a playground and where we teach you to fall safely because we're maintaining them and have proper fall material. So that is why play exists. It is so important as a child to get outside and play. And it's something I encourage for adults too. Public versus private. This has been something that I've been getting a lot of questions on. There are differences between public parks and private parks, as well as public playgrounds and private playgrounds. So public items are ones that anybody and everybody can go to today. You can drive up to it, you can walk in, you can enjoy its benefits. Private ones can be on private property. They can have permanent easements, recreational easements over the top. They can also have other agreements that make them private. Sometimes you see them with a sign warning you it's private property and to stay away. Other times it has a fence securely around it. And then the other public side that we see are businesses who charge for awesome indoor playgrounds and other outdoor items. So in our city, anything that is on city land that you can physically walk into should be held to public park standards, not only to make sure that they're maintained properly, but to make sure that they're safe. And all of the above are checked off. When we get into public playgrounds specifically, it is a very highly regulated industry. You can see here 3 different major standards, guidelines, and laws that have to be followed in order to have a playground installed on public property. It's not optional. 2 of them, the CPSC and the ASTMI, are all about the design of the playground and the fall material underneath. So how do we build them to make sure they're as safe as possible? How do we maintain them to make sure they're as safe as possible? And then, of course, you have ADA. That's all about accessibility. We want to make sure that people can use the parks and that nobody is sitting on the sideline having to watch their other friends play. We don't want people to be not able to be included. So ADA is the minimum. That's where we've met the minimum standards. And then you'll also hear other words in the playground industry, such as all-inclusive or accessible. And often that's where we have pour in place tiles or a rubber surface that is easier for not only wheelchairs, but moms with strollers or somebody who's broke their leg and is using a walker or a cane can more easily get to the playground. And then some of them are also built with full ramps, so you can get up onto the playground with mobility assist devices. So there's certainly different levels. ADA is just the basic. It is ADA law, and it is 1008 if you're going to look it up and are interested in any of those. Why do these standards exist? Well, it's to keep kids safe. We know kids are going to fall. We know kids are going to test the limits. We know that they're going to fall off the playground. But when they do, we do not want to have any deaths, and we do not want to have any serious debilitating injuries. We don't want permanent disabilities because you were playing on a playground. It would be a tragedy. And so all of the standards that we look for when we do inspections or when they're built, it's all about preventing that to the best of our ability. We know people will get hurt, they'll push the limits, they'll have fun, but we want them to be as safe as possible doing so. All right, so playground safety. With all of that, what happens with those laws? Well, there's 2 ways to get this education as a professional. The Certified Playground Safety Inspector is in conjunction with National Recreation and Parks Association. There's course manuals, there are field guides, things that are tools out in the field for us to do our inspections, to abide by all of those standards. They're pretty hefty books, as you can see. The CPSI is an official certification. You can take an educational course either by attending a 2-day in person or going online for an educational course. And then you get to take an exam, and the exam is very difficult. In our industry, we say only about 30 to 40
Does anyone else not have sound?
Nobody has sound.
Yeah,
It even shows that the city's muted.
Yeah, and she's muted too.
yeah. Does it work since we're talking? Will we be able to bug them? Because we can hear each other.
Maybe.
Yeah, we cannot
Well,
hear you.
why don't we all like wave and try and get their attention and maybe then
I-
they'll-
It's not even, there's no
I
sound on
think they
YouTube.
have our attention now, or someone is looking.
I've tried notifying them on YouTube that we can't hear anything.
They heard us talking, so they muted everyone again.
we can't hear you guys.
Hear me for working on it. One moment.
The audio quit probably about 5 minutes ago.
This is frustrating.
We don't have audio. Maybe they
Anybody?
got-
Sarah, actually your mic is muted. No, I think your mic is still on mute.
Does anybody know that this isn't working for volume? Anybody?
And now it's working fine.
No, I can able to
No.
hear.
No, we
Not
can hear
Sarah.
each other, but we can't hear them.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think they can hear us and they're trying to fix it, but it's Sarah. Yes. Okay. See, he's saying he can hear us, but Sarah and the city are muted in Zoom. So that's probably what they're trying to figure out.
Can you hear us now?
We heard you right then.
Okay, thank you. We got it.
You were fine at first, and then when you started talking about playground certification, you went bye-bye.
Okay, but you hear this? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. See? All right, Sarah, we're back up. Okay, we're turning off our mic and Sarah will be turning on hers.
Okay, perfect. Can everybody hear me now?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and back up to the certifications, and I'm going to go at a little faster pace, but I will go ahead and loop back around to that. I apologize for that inconvenience. Okay, perfect. So certifications, I'm not sure how far I got there, but I'll just give you a rundown really quick. A certified playground safety inspector does have a 2-day course that they can attend in person or a hefty educational course they can take over the internet. They have a exam, which must be retaken every 3 years. And then there's a certification course called the Playground Maintenance Tech. They focus more on the maintenance, but do touch and learn pieces of the certified playground safety inspections also. So some measurements, safety facts. There are different types of inspections we can do on playgrounds. We have audits, which is where we can go in and measure every single piece to determine if it still meets public standards. Sometimes pieces, as they become aged, can warp and perhaps gaps form where they shouldn't. We can also determine if it was a public or a private playground based on the standards talked about previously. We have low and high frequency inspections. So one of those happens just once a year, and the other one can happen more frequently and more often. And that's where we're going in to check nuts and bolts and make sure that the fall material swept back into place and making sure on an ongoing basis we're replacing items that need to be replaced. All right, so playgrounds. We do have 13 public playgrounds on city property. 5 of these were closed for safety. In looking at the records of many of these public playgrounds, they were built when the development of residents were created. So really they were built and designed to serve the HOAs and communities that were built around them. Let's talk about the 5 that we closed to catch us up to about where we left off. Mandolin Court. When you look at Mandolin Court, it did have additional pieces at one point, I'm told by local staff. If you are part of this community and you do have an HOA or a president from the HOA, I would love to hear from you. Please contact Parks. If you don't have one, I'd love to hear from a neighbor that's living right there so that we can make sure everybody knows how to take surveys on this location in the future. This park was told by staff originally did have a fence around it, a drinking fountain, and other playground items as well. A few years ago, the city public works department went ahead and removed several of the unsafe pieces, and this is what was remaining as of a week ago. As of today, the actual bouncing items have been removed from the park. The bark and the border is to stay for this time until we determine the future of the playground. All right, so the next one was Summer Hills Estate. We did meet with this HOA just on Monday virtually to talk about their community park and the homeowners' desires nearby. This is up on a hill. What you can't see from the photo is there's a small bend in the road, and it is up a hill. So it sounds like the locals love to use this for sledding in the winter, especially. It was just the one single tube component that we removed at this time. This structure was also removed today, which means the fence and the posts will come out tomorrow if it was not already done today. The other 3 playgrounds we're going to talk about right now are fenced off and have not been removed. They're a little bit larger, so we're working on those plans currently. I'll dive right into the one that has been the hottest topic since this announcement came out, and that's Oak Hill. Oak Hill is also known as the Timbers. It went through a naming process a few years ago through the Parks Planning Board. We do have on our list of needs to place that park signage. I apologize that it so far has not received its signs. That will be happening as soon as we can get to it with our priority list. This playground is new, was built within the last 3 years. And this is very confusing as to why it needs to be shut down. It was not an easy decision. Me and my staff went out there and did what we call a full audit on it. When you look at this playground, through all of our measurements and all of the rules being applied that are set by the standards of public playgrounds, it failed in many aspects. The number one thing I can see just from looking at it right here from my screen is that it does not meet ADA standard. It does not have a transfer platform at the entry. It has an attempt. It has 2 triangle pieces, and you can see they're in the form of steps, but there's specific measurements that have to be done in a flat area. And what a transfer platform is so that if anybody's in a mobility assisted device, they can then choose to lift themselves out of that and go onto the playground to play. This doesn't allow for that. It also doesn't have ground play components. Some of these playgrounds, you'll see wheels or tic-tac-toe or little things that you can yell at your friend across the playground in. Those don't exist. And so by standards, it fails on that ADA component. And then when we start measuring the distance between components, they were built too close together, which means that if you fall from one component, you can bonk your head or hit other body parts on these other components. And then when we stood there and shook it, it moved. You don't want playgrounds to move. You want them to be sturdy so that it doesn't fail on you. The slide especially had overlapping zones. That is one of the biggest ones. You cannot have overlapping zones. We also have fall distances, 6 foot from any item that has to at a minimum be maintained. Other items like spinners that aren't represented here would have a larger distance and larger overlaps and other rules. But those are the why. When you look at the swing set, you go, well, that one surely has to meet it. It does have 2 bucket seats in one bay with the toddler seat in the other bay. That's correct. You can't have a bucket seat and a swoop seat in the same location. So that's correct. However, it has a flat beam on the top. In the world of play, if you have a surface of more than 2 by 2 inches, it constitutes a play surface. That means you can stand on it. means you can walk on it. And the top of this thing is flat. When you go to Lundin and some of these other swing sets, you'll notice they're rounded because you have to have more than a 30% angle in order to get out of that play zone. So what does that mean? Well, we know that especially teenagers love to have fun on playgrounds. So 2 people could technically lift a third up on the top to walk on this as a balance beam. That's where we get into a lot of trouble, especially if people are swinging. And so that is one of the whys in public playground that bar up top didn't meet. And then the hangers themselves have to be 20 inches apart. They have to go out or vertical instead of in. And so when we started to look at it, it just doesn't meet it. Then the question gets, well, can't you modify it? And we go, well, the playground technician could technically start modifying it, but now you're messing with the structural engineering of the item, especially if you're trying to move something 1 or 2 inches on steel. And the amount of work it would try to get safe, and we're not engineers, it becomes a very complicated process that I would rather make the decision to keep people safe. And so that is the why. Now there's a lot of questions about who pays for this. How does this happen? What's next? What I can promise you is we're committed to replacing another playground. The what's next will take the community to decide. We're rolling out surveys at the end of this that I'll talk about, and I encourage everybody to take them. How it'll be paid for, that's to be determined. We have a lot of stuff on the background. We're talking to everybody involved with the playground installment and the park up until now, and we're untangling that web. So I'll have more information in the future. I just can't answer that tonight. Then we have the Reserve 2. These addresses are on our website in case you're not sure where these are located. This is located at the end of a cul-de-sac and an HOA, and you walk down the path and around. And this is the playground that exists. Our staff did add playground bark a couple years ago, I believe was the year. But as we really started to look at this, the first thing you notice is it's mostly wood. And if you're familiar with wood, you know that it doesn't last in the outdoor elements forever. What happens is with these bolts, as people continue to use the playground, everything's moving, right? So your bolts start getting looser, and it can be near impossible for us to keep things tight, where it will not then get again loose with consistent movement. We see items like dry rot. We see items where the steel is starting to be exposed, and some other things that we had major safety concerns about. Playgrounds are not supposed to last more than 30 years. A lot of playgrounds only last 25 years. Some playgrounds last 20 years or even 15 years if they were not maintained properly. And by that, I mean, you have to tighten the nuts and bolts monthly, yearly, and sand down wood and stain it. And so those things can help get life out of playgrounds. But this is just the state we're in. We do not feel that the money that it would take to try to get this another 1 to 3 years of use would have much benefit. It is better to refocus and say, what goes here? Is it another playground? Is it another type of recreation? What does the community want and need? So that's the process that we're going down. The playground bark can be relocated over to one of our other playgrounds if it doesn't stay here for a future playground. Greenwood Village 2 and the one that we're calling the Reserve 2 were actually part of the same subdivision. They were actually part of the same HOA group in years history, but they're located on opposite sides of a large green area. So driving routes don't make it feasible for you to really use both of them. You'll notice that they have a lot of the same look to them, also wood. Also installed about the same year or a few years apart. This one, as far back as 2012, I can see from photos from Straight View that it did have a private playground sign at that time. So that's what I'm talking about when we're saying the history's bounce back and forth with who used to maintain them and how they were built versus where we're at today. With this, we do believe that we can repair this one and get it back open to the public. But again, I don't know that it will have much more than 3 years useful life. It's something that we're going to continually monitor and look at, really do in-depth inspections every 6 months to ensure that it remains safe and open as long as possible. This one has a survey where we'll be talking about the future, just because we know the future within 3 years can go quick and we want to be early with engaging with the public. How long will it take to repair this one? I don't have a date. What I would like to do is make sure that my staff focuses on all of the repairs on the playgrounds that are currently open today, to ensure that they're all ready to go as we creak into spring. And this one is also high on our priority list, and we'll be taking down the fencing as soon as we can get it to repairable state. So those are the 5 playgrounds that were on our list for the official press release and the closures, sorry. The last piece here is public engagement. We want to talk to the public. We need your help. We want you to answer these surveys. So what we're doing, we didn't quite get to it today, and I apologize. We have few staff and lots to do. We're hoping to get these surveys out tomorrow, Friday. We will push it out to social media. We'll put it on our website. If you do not have access to the web, or you know people that want to answer these surveys but cannot access it online, I can print you one. You can absolutely get a hold of us. Our phone number will be on the last page of this. So why 6 surveys? Well, first and most important, we want every single resident who is interested to answer what I call a general citywide playground survey. This is talking about our entire city. What do we have? What do we need? Do you have one within walking distance? Do you want one within walking distance? Should we have more small playgrounds or more larger playgrounds that have ample amount of play where communities can come together? What types of playgrounds do you want to see? Do you want to see swings? Do you want to see slides or things that spin or climbers with nets? Those are questions that we want to talk to the public about. And also, what other types of recreation? We have questions on there like, do you want to see pickleball or other sorts of fun stuff, dog parks? So we're really getting a good gauge from the community on what you need in parks and playgrounds from that general survey. So everybody should, at a minimum, answer that one. And then we have 5 additional surveys, one for each of the locations that were closed. Absolutely, the homeowners in the neighborhoods of these locations should answer them, as well as anybody who's interested in using that area, right? If you've been there in the past, if you intend to go there, that one also needs feedback. So each of those have a little more specific questions generated towards those properties. They will be available for 2 full weeks. And that is to ensure everybody has time to get on, that the word can spread. We also have open comments at the end. So if you want to say something not on the survey, please fill that out. Additionally, you can always contact the Parks and Recreation Department. My direct number was on the press release. That's a great way to get a hold of me now to talk about playgrounds, but my time becomes very full. And so what I ask is that you call this number right here. This is the Public Works main phone number. It was also on the press release and it's on our website. You'll either get City Hall if you call another number, or this one, Public Works. Either way, you'll always be routed to the Parks Department. We'll get you in touch with the right people. If you're going to send an email, I highly encourage you to send it to parks@lakestevenswa.gov. The reason why is it goes into an email box that all admin staff can check and route to the right person. If you're emailing one specific person, they might be caught in meetings, they might be on vacation or out sick. It can make it harder for us to keep up with demand and get back to people in a timely manner. So this is the preferred email address for all staff. And we are working on a Parks and Recreation Department Facebook page, which will be coming out soon. We're also exploring other social media avenues such as Instagram. Twitter may or may not be included in that. We'll gauge the community to see. We will be having our comments and dialogues open so that whenever we post park specific items, that responses and comments can be made to that specific item and stay on topic, but make sure we have that dialogue and always keep the public informed. And I have talked a lot, and I apologize for that, but I hope that everybody has learned a little bit of something and you have a little bit better of an understanding as to why and how we got here. But the biggest takeaway is we want to work with the public. Parks and Rec are here to serve our residents and to really make sure our recreational opportunities meet what you need. So now's the time to encourage you to take surveys when they come out. Again, we'll be doing our best to post those all tomorrow online. If you don't see it, you can always give us a call and ask us how to get to it, and we'll make sure to get you connected to the right location. And now it's questions and comments. I'll go ahead and take questions and comments from anybody in the audience since I can physically see them first. And then online, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and we can call on you. If your question's already answered, you can then lower your hand so that we're not having the same repeat questions. And thank you very much. If I can ask you to go up to the podium, and there is a light that is red. You'll just have to push it. Now you're green in your life.
So the certified playground safety inspection, is this state or national mandated?
This is a course that certifies you to know all of the laws included in it. So the mandates put in place for playgrounds, it's not at the state level, it would be at the US level, federal. And that is when we're talking about the consumer safety products and those American standard testings and ADA.
So has the city adopted this? So it's not state mandated. I don't understand how playgrounds like the new one at the Timbers could have been built if it wasn't, air quotes, legal. And so maybe you could kind of help me understand why the city is adopting this standard if it can't meet it. And then my second question is, what does your budget look like? What is the amount in your budget to replace these items? For example, the Timbers, that's like $100,000 play structure. And I'd like to know what your budget looks like for replacing all these potential structures.
Absolutely. Great questions. Okay, so what a certified playground safety inspector is, it's not something that you adopt. What it is it is a certification that states that the person who holds the certification now knows the federal laws and has the knowledge and the ability to inspect playgrounds and apply the law. And so what that means is if a city was to hire somebody to say, I am going to hire somebody to inspect my playground for safety, or even if a public location was to do that, who would you call? When you look up online, you would need to contact a certified playground safety inspector, as they are the only ones that are qualified to come in and inspect a playground. So what has happened is when we became an official Parks and Recreation department, we now have staff that are certified playground safety inspectors. So I myself am an inspector. David is an inspector. And then we had one more staff that just passed as of yesterday. Fabulous. And we have one more ready to get certified as well. What it means is that we can take all of the laws and apply them out in the field. So great question. How did the one at the Timbers get installed? Well, I can tell you that when you pull the engineering plans for that location, that the play set is identified on there, but the swing set was a different model. We're trying to untangle the web of how it got on the engineering plans, how it got approved. I don't have those answers tonight, but what I can say in my best response is that prior to, we did not have people specially trained in playgrounds on staff. We did not have the staff who knew this very specialized in-depth knowledge. And I think that we often rely on other professionals to know that information, right? You're buying the playground, you've worked with the engineers, you're working with the construction company, but playgrounds are extremely specialized. And I'll tell you, in working with contractors over the past many, many years, they know ADA, but they don't know something called ABA, which is the Architectural Barrier Act. That should also be a standard applied to playgrounds. And so often I have, over my past years, educated contractors and engineers on what that means and how they need to change the design to keep up with real accessibility in parks. And so there are a lot of different things. And I can tell you, playgrounds are not something that people know in depth. I will tell you that we are doing better as a city. We will continue to do better. We have the knowledge now, and this is not a mistake that will happen again. That's the best answer I can provide to you. So moving on to budget. You're correct. What kind of budget do I have today? I don't, but we have the promise of we will get it fixed. We're trying to go back through to say, how does this get paid for? Right? There are a lot of different hands involved in making the decisions for it getting installed. So I'm working with all of the involved agencies and departments and companies on the back end in order to go through that process now. From there, when the Parks Department was created back in August, we then had to create the new year budget just a couple months after my onboarding. And I very purposely did not ask for a huge increase in budget because I didn't have a plan. Instead, I told the council that I do not know what's coming, but I want to make sure that we spend our money wisely and that we assess it and we work together on that. And so as we identify needs of the parks, because it's not just going to be playgrounds, there could be many other things that need to be addressed. We can package that up. We can make sure they're being maintained in the order that they need to, that the grass gets cut often enough, that the weeds are removed, that we take care of ADA items and that they're safe and useful. So we're going through that process, and I'm happy to keep you updated as all of it comes along. I plan to be transparent with the public. Anybody else in the physical audience? Tina. And you'll just need to hit that green light to activate your mic.
So I'm curious as to how this is city property, but it's got HOA built. How does that work? Are there easements or were there agreements? I was just curious about that.
So Oak Hill was a park that was worked on in partnership through their development agreement. And so the developer that developed the neighborhood had offered the city a park, a publicly owned park in that neighborhood. So at the time of the completion of the construction, they dedicated it to the city. If that answers your question. Were they all that? No, they're various. There's one over in the Catherine Creek neighborhood that was dedicated the property itself was dedicated to the city at the time of the plat. But then later the neighborhood got together and said, hey, if we pay for this, can we put, a playground in? And so some of them were developed in that manner. Some of them were developed, really far back in history. And some of these were in the county, and we've annexed the properties. And so there, in answer to your question, there's various ways that they were.
But these ones that we're gonna work on, now we close off, are they city parcels?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know a lot about land use and how things used to be done, but what I can say is that trends have changed. Back when a lot of these were built, when the community was built, you're also required to have what we call open space, right? Everybody wants to keep the trees. We don't just want house after house after house. That's no good for quality of life or the environment. So we would have to have a certain amount of open space that is built. And that's still a requirement today, just on different metrics. Back then, it seemed to be very common that the city also wanted open space in their inventory. And I'm not sure if it was land use laws that required it or how it came about. However, they would parcel off all those open space, those in GPAs, and donate them to the city and say, hey, congratulations, here they are. And we would take them. And then what would happen is the recreational space that was above the dirt, not owned by the city, right? We owned the taxes and the dirt underneath. And then that land surface, the developer would often put trails on it or add a playground or a basketball court and have the HOAs continue to maintain them. So many of these locations that are listed as HOA playgrounds, when you look at that parks and amenities list that we presented to council and parks board quite a few months ago, when it says owned by the city but managed by HOA, the HOAs are the ones doing the landscaping. For instance, they're cutting the grass. All right, they might be repairing the fences. At one point, they were in charge of playgrounds, but again, specialized skill. People don't know what to do with those, and these things become expensive. When you build things, you don't always know what the cost is going to be 10, 20, 30 years later. And so it's trends have changed, if that helps. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, come on up to the mic and just remember to turn that on.
Hey, Sarah, this is Senthil. So actually, when DIA.
Go ahead. Two parts. One, with Oak Hill. as we were sold our homes, we were sold with the understanding that even with our tiny lots, we had access to this wonderful park. So for it to just disappear is not acceptable. It affects so many aspects, like you talked about earlier, how important parks are. So I'm curious how that is really going to be addressed. Is that just through this survey? Like it's luck of the draw, what park gets fixed or if it gets fixed at all? And the second part of my question is what happens in the meantime? You're taking down the park. How long is it going to be vacant? What is it going to be like in the meantime? What can we expect in terms of the timeframe for moving forward?
Great questions. What I can first say is I just want to continue to clarify with the public, as it's a question that I keep getting. The parks themselves are open. However, the playgrounds themselves are closed. So anybody who hasn't been visually there, I know you have, but for the rest of the audience, we put the T-posts and the orange fencing in the zone of the playground only and blocked that off, posted it with signs so people knew about this meeting and let people know whether it was being removed or replaced. So the park is open, the playground is closed. We agree playgrounds are important. The city is committed to ensuring that a replacement playground goes there. The best thing I can offer you right now is that you get to help determine what is replaced. What kind of playground does your children want? Does it want the swings? Does it want slides? Does it want a big net to climb? Do you want those spinning items? And so it is a unique opportunity where we get to go back and say, now what? So I know that whatever is built, the community will love because it'll be the majority of what people are voting for. How we get there is still undetermined. I don't have a hard deadline. And by giving no deadline, I know that that's always very worrisome. But I also don't want to tell you that I'll have an answer in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks and then fail that. What I can promise is that I will continue to have this open dialogue. I have returned every email and every phone call, except for I did have one voice message today I wasn't able to return. So we're here, we're accessible, we're going to continue the dialogue. We're in research mode right now, talking to all of those different companies we've talked about. And then I'll need to proceed through council after that web is untangled. The surveys are open for 2 weeks. I would hope that I have substantially better response and reassurance to you in 2 weeks from now. I can tell you that the city is committed to replacing that. Every council member that was made aware of this, the mayor, the city administrator, their immediate response was, we need to fix this. We need a playground there. So I know it'll happen. All right, any other questions in the crowd? Yes, sir, come forward. And we'll be getting to everybody online very shortly. Just please bear with us.
Thank you. I found your presentation very informative, so thank you for that. On the timbers also, right? I had the same concern. Replacing the playground would be great. I don't think anyone would say no to getting something better, but we fence it off, so it's not usable. And then if you remove it, and you're saying we don't have funding, so we don't know, but we're committed. That leaves a lot of concern to, well, will it be, even if there's commitment? That's one thing, but money talks, right? And like, we have to have the funding to replace that. So that's maybe a comment, since you've kind of answered some of the questions, but I would hope that if the playground gets removed, that there's already funding in place. There's already a plan to replace it. And also want to make the ask that till that happens, perhaps we can still open the playground. I understand there might be some of the guides that you're saying it doesn't fix, but I've been there almost every day. The sun's out with my 3 kids, and I find it to be pretty safe. I'm always there, and so I just feel it's a little too soon to be closing it off, in my opinion, just as a comment. And then just to close off with the if you are to move it with plans to replace, like, please do that with the funding in place, not with promises, because there's not much we can do with that. So thank you.
Forward. So I understand. I don't have great answers. Our first priority was to make sure that the public playground standards that I am required to uphold as a parks director, as a city official, that they were met. And that's why it got closed without a plan. We wanted to make sure that all of the laws were first and foremost followed by the government at hand. But I do hear you, and I do promise to have this as a very top priority so that this is not an ever-ending no response. Thank you.
Hey, Sarah, this is Senthil. So actually, in Timbers, DR hadn't built this.
Online community, I'm sorry, please.
Sarah, you muted your mic again, so we can't hear you.
Know whether it was being. I think when you guys are muting all, that's when we get the problem.
Are you able to hear us now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So I've been a certified playground inspector since 1993 when the program was first accredited. When it comes to playground safety is not an option. Okay. Children die on playgrounds every year. It's up to us as the adults to make the playground environment safe for them. Okay. The standards and guidelines that are in place, CPSC and ASTM, are based on child injury data from hospital injury data. Okay. Safety, if you have a piece of playground equipment that is non-compliant, the odds of a child getting hurt are fairly high. And those standards are based on children having permanent and debilitating injuries. That is the standard of care, okay? It's not a law that's been adopted, but it's a standard of care that's been upheld by the courts. If a child falls, gets hurt, and is injured because the playground equipment was non-compliant with the standards and guidelines, the city is responsible for that. Okay. So if your child is permanently injured because the piece of wood that's there is rotting and failed, that becomes a liability situation for the city. And that's why, cities are concerned with making sure the playgrounds are safe. Unfortunately, over the years, a lot of playgrounds have been adopted by cities that are built by homeowners associations, and even worse, by the developers. Unfortunately, they're going to buy the cheapest piece of equipment that's out there that doesn't necessarily meet all the standards and guidelines. 4 of those 5 playgrounds are being closed are all from the same manufacturer. The manufacturer is going to say, well, it's not my responsibility to make the playground safe. It's the owner's responsibility. So they pass it off. That particular company, though, has been sued a number of times. They've changed their name a number of times, even since those playgrounds were installed, which gives you an idea of what kind of financial position they're in. In many cases, the city is adopting something that is a nightmare. Okay. And they just don't know it. People in City Hall, they accept a piece of property and great, we've got this nice valuable piece of property, but the playground itself becomes a liability for the city. So that's kind of where the city is at right now. Playgrounds do have a limited life cycle. Okay. Typically 10 to 15 years for a wood playground, 20 to 30 years for a plastic or a metal playground. And what happens more often than not is before the playground becomes unsafe with a good piece of equipment, it'll become obsolete due to changes in the standards and guidelines, because they do evolve. As playground injuries occur, as those injury data comes in, those standards and guidelines get changed and upgraded. Okay, CPSC has been updated twice. ASTM is upgraded every few years. Okay, and ASTM is a standard of care that is a higher standard of care than even the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Okay, because CPSC hasn't been funded and hasn't been refunded. Okay, where ASTM as a voluntary organization, that's being constantly updated, year after year. So, right now it's up to the community for all of us to pressure council to make this a priority. If we want to see better playgrounds in our community, we need to tell everybody this is a high priority for us. We need to have the funding allocated towards playgrounds. There's other funding sources. There's money. There's RCO money. There's all different funding sources that are out there. It's just going to be a matter of the community saying this is a priority. We don't want the money going towards fixing the boat ramp or all these other things that need to be done in the community. It needs to be appropriated towards playgrounds. So it's up to the community to make that pressure, put that pressure on mayor, council, everybody else in order to make it happen. So, and unfortunately, there's always neighborhoods always feel like, oh, we can't, we're losing our playground. We just put all this thing in the ground just a few years ago. You know, I understand that. Unfortunately, this is one of the situations where the manufacturer who provided it to somebody who purchased it, not knowing what the standards and guidelines, what today's standard of care really is. So it's an unfortunate situation. It's, you know, it's tough for city people and it's tough for the community. But unfortunately, when it comes to playground safety, we can't compromise on the safety of our children. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. And if I can get your information before you leave, I'd appreciate it.
Is there anyone else here in the audience that would like to speak? Go ahead. And our online people will be with you shortly.
So I always get roped into root cause corrective action. So my question to you, you said that you will make sure that this never happens again. How will you do that? And second question is, if you had the money right now, what timeline would it take to replace the timbers?
Great questions. Okay, so root cause, how? First and foremost, Parks is creating standards for our department, which will say things like a minimum of 2 CPSI on staff at all times. If we don't have one, we'll train someone, they'll get there. If we need to hire someone, that'll be a requirement. So that's the first, is make sure that the education is always in-house. How on all the future builds? As a Parks department, I am reviewing all of the engineer plans. I am reviewing all of the equipment that goes in. We're looking at everything from the sprinkler line used to how the new depot building right here is going to be built. So we're reviewing those, we're checking them off. Not only am I, but I'm passing them to my staff. Every single one of my staff has seen those plans and also approved them. And so it is a way that we're sharing information that we never have before. And that will continue while I'm here. And even after I'm gone, because everyone retires eventually, we will have a standards manual that the city should continue to uphold after that. And I know that the city cares a lot about Parks and Recreation. So that's where we're at. That's how we're going to fix it moving forward. Now with the money, well, gosh, it really just depends what type of playground are we building. So if I had the money today, this meeting would look different. We'd have pictures of playgrounds all over the place. You'd have colored dots to tell me what colors you like, what types of play you like. Let's get down to the nitty gritty of what are we putting in this playground. From there, we'd have to go to 3 different manufactured playgrounds. We say, here's your, here's our specs. Here's what we're looking for. Here's the type of play. Design us the playgrounds, tell us the money. So they design them, they give us the money. With that, we ask them, how long does it take to manufacture it? Manufacturing has been a little bit backlogged with COVID, but I know they're quickly catching up at this point. So we may choose to go with a manufacturer that can produce it sooner than later. You could get a playground manufactured in a month or 2, custom build. You can also order them today. They have catalogs every day that say, this is last year's model. It's fully built. We need to sell it today. And those ones are a little bit price reduced. You don't get to customize them, but it can be shipped tomorrow. And playgrounds can be installed as little as 1 day if they're small. Large ones can take a couple of weeks. The steel legs have to be concreted into the ground. But it just really depends what type of playground. So the good news is we're going to be doing all of the legwork with the surveys. And I've already offered to each HOA or community to do breakout meetings. So Summer Hills Estate already took me up on that. We met Monday night. I've offered it to the Oak Hill Timbers community. So I can come and we can do a virtual or in person or a combination bridge meeting, just talking about that playground specifically. Absolutely. And then if there's nobody else in the audience, we'll move to online.
Would you consider maybe not just doing social media, possibly like a mailer to those neighborhoods? Because I feel like a lot of the community doesn't understand. I feel like you need to consider ways outreach that would be like, I called my neighbors because they didn't know. And I think that's unfortunate, right? Facebook filters what you see and what you don't. And so could you possibly think of other ways to contact them to get their feedback?
Absolutely. And that's a great comment. So anybody who does use the internet, and I know not everybody does, but if you don't already subscribe to the City of Lake Stevens calendars, you can receive an email every time there is a meeting by the Parks Board or for City Council. It's a great way to be pinged whenever something piques your interest. We did do on-site postings already with posters at the park with this date and time to notify people, but I understand not everybody, especially in this weather, is using the parks. We can absolutely get a cost for mailing but there is a cost, a minimum of probably $1 per household that we mail. So it's something we certainly can do, and I'll look into it. It's not something that we have been doing, but I can look. In any other ways that you guys come up with, email us, let us know. We're happy to try different methods. Absolutely.
Can Eileen Koska unmute if you still had a question or comment, please?
I do. Thank you. I actually have a couple questions. So one of my first questions is, it starts with a comment. This is not the first time the city has been in the spotlight for ADA violations, and it seems to just continue to be at the people's cost. So my first question is, what plans do you have in place to screen these developers that we continue to sell land to ensure that they're following their guidelines, and to make sure that we actually put parks back that meet these standards, right? You can take our opinions, you can take a poll, but at the end of the day, if there's no oversight and we keep selling to these same developers that continue to make these parks unsafe, we're only going to keep going in this circle. So what accountability is there going to be for the people that let these parks go in the first place? So I know you're looking for who's at fault and you're unraveling that, but how are we going to hold them accountable? And then the second part is, when is the city going to take ownership for their lack of ADA compliance? There's still parks out there that are not on your list that are not ADA compliant. And we were told, oh, well, parks are important. And the Chapel Hill whole deal fell through. So it's just hard to believe that the things that you're saying are actually going to happen. So I just want to know where the accountability is going to come on the city's part.
Thank you. I appreciate your bringing this up. What I'll tell you is, I have to earn the public's trust. I'll be working with you to do that. And my staff will be doing the same. We want to talk to the public. We want to be held accountable. I will hold myself accountable publicly and with my staff. I do every day. How on the ADA? Well, I can tell you, I am highly trained in ADA and ABA. ADA is what you see for this room, for the library, for the sidewalks, for the bathrooms, for your parking lots. ABA, the Architectural Barrier Act, goes a step further. It takes accessibility to trails. It takes them into things that aren't in ADA. In 2010, ADA got updated to bring in boat ramps, to bring in playgrounds, to bring in fishing piers. Everything else that I'll just call them the feds, that the feds couldn't agree on, went into ABA. ABA must be followed when you're on federal land and when you're using federal dollars. And so that affects parks. It really is the parks industry standard moving forward. And that's what I look for in parks. I can't speak to what anybody has done prior to me. I can tell you that the official Parks and Recreation Department, again, was created in August. I can tell you not only am I trained, but I have assigned 2 of my top field staff to learn more about ADA, and they have a series of courses they're going through. I can also tell you on the back end of Public Works, there are several staff, including all of their engineer staff, who have now completed all the ADA training through the Department of Transportation, I believe is who put that on. So we have now all of the knowledge. Now we can properly apply it. I can tell you the city, as far as Public Works for their transportation plan, is going through a whole ADA transition plan. It was required by Title 10, or 2010 Title II ADA. They're completing that now. After that, parks are also on the list to get fully assessed. I can do an internal assessment, but we also need to turn it into a full plan. So we do have a hired contractor to make sure that everything is done properly. From there, we can rank it. We can take care of immediate barriers. The barriers are things that allow you not to actually access it. If you can't get into the restroom, if you can't get into that toilet stall, right? If you can't get to the playground, those are physical barriers. That is the top priority for removing. Other things like the height of parking signs absolutely need to be corrected, but they don't prevent people from using the facility. So that's how I will prioritize everything moving forward. My staff is probably already sick of the words ADA and ABA, but they will hear them in their sleep and they will learn it also. That's what I can say. I take accessibility and all of those standards seriously, and I'm committed in parks to doing that. It can be expensive, especially at this point looking back. So we just prioritize it. We bite off the chunks that are the true barriers to prevent you to use services, and then you continue from there. I'm happy to also hear what is most important to you in parks. You're welcome to email us so that I can look at specific parks or areas that might not be on my radar yet. But I can tell you I've walked every inch of our parks so far with my staff. So we have big lists started in the background. I hope that answered all of the questions on that one.
So I just have a follow-up on that. I guess the accountability piece of the developers. So the city continues to not listen to the public's opinion on places like Chapel Hill and instead sells to the developers. What are you and your parks team doing to ensure those developers are now following these compliance rules and all the ADA regulations, ADA regulations, so that we aren't here in 2 years again, like with Oak Hill, with a development that needs to be ripped out or a park that needs to be ripped out?
Okay, I absolutely understand that part, and I'm sorry that I didn't accurately write that down. So when you develop private parks or private properties, you're not subject to ADA. All right, so that's the first thing. So when a developer is going to be developing an area that is identified to be turned over to the Parks and Recreation Department, I can tell you I'm working closely with the Community Development and Planning Department now to say what is upcoming. Who are you talking with? What parks are identified for public use in the future? I can then get involved on the ground floor. I'm requiring myself, and I'm reminding every day, what meeting am I not invited to that I need to be at, so that I can see the concept plans from the get-go. I can see the engineering plans, my staff can as well, so that we can review it and ensure that the contractors and the engineers not only follow ADA, but that ABA portion, that they didn't know that trail also had to meet it because it's not in the ADA. So that's what we're doing as a parks department. If there was a private park that came to city council and they said, we no longer want this park, we want the city to own it, we want them to maintain it, I would say, hey, red flag, let's go ahead and do an assessment on that. What we can then do is say, okay, as a condition of us taking it over before we ever agree to transfer it into the city's inventory, these are the things that first and foremost need to be addressed, because we can't acquire it and then go through it to fix things that should have been fixed prior to us acquiring it. So those are the two things that I can do to help control that in the future, and that my department can do as standards as well.
And also, just for anyone that does see any questionable, or they had a question about ADA, there is a way to submit that online, as well as you can email any of us and we'll follow up for that. So if you do see anything out in the field, do let us know. It looks like next is Annie B. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Annie from Oak Hill Timbers. Thank you for your presentation. It clears up a lot of questions. So there's no timeline, there's no budget in place. I guess my question is, how do we as residents of the Timbers put pressure on our city council members to sway the budget in our favor? I mean, I'm looking at the budget calendar. It looks like there's public hearings that start in the beginning of November. Is that the case every year?
Yeah, absolutely. We can get that answered.
I mean, what do we do? Like, how can we turn this in our favor? In your presentation, you talked about the city's mistake. And I mean, you know, my boy's one. Like, I want him to be able to go to a park. You know, are we talking a year? Are we talking 2 years? I'd like my boy to play at the park at our house in our development. And
go ahead.
I'm just wondering what sort of action we can take. I mean, this is all out of our control. What sort of action can we take as members of the Timbers to try and sway this in our favor, so our HOA isn't, suddenly given a large percentage that we need to cover for our park to be replaced?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. So the good news is this officially is a full public park. This is not an HOA park. So any of your HOA dues does not go into the maintenance of this park, or it shouldn't, because it is a public park. The most important thing that you could do is, number one, you're here. You're voicing your opinion. You're learning. That is absolutely gold. Thank you for your time. The second thing is answer the surveys and get everybody that you know to answer these surveys, whether they're the general surveys or the specific Oak Hill survey. That one is also a public playground, so that affects everybody in the city. They should be answering it. From there, I'm going to turn over the mic. We do have City Council President Angie here with us, and you can turn on your mic.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for the question. And I just wanted to, I'm going to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you for each of you for taking the time to be here and voicing your concerns. It's super important that we hear what you're concerned about and what direction you want to go. I want to reiterate, it's, you know, Sarah can sit there and say, we have the council support, but as the council president, I want to reassure you all that all 7 members of the council are deeply concerned about closing playgrounds in our city, and are very committed to making sure that we make this right as soon as possible. You're right, Annie, the budget process starts usually in October. We review the budget and we approve the budget for the following year. But every year I've been on council, we have department directors come to us mid-year with requests for amendments, because you can't necessarily predict what's going to happen in the coming year. And so it's customary for department heads to come to a council meeting and to request amendments, to request funding for unforeseen circumstances. That will happen with this process. And because we've talked about this as a council, because we're aware of that and we're learning, just as the rest of you are learning, we're all continuing to learn about this process. We are committed to making this right. So I look forward to the community feedback. I look forward to the recommendations that come from that. And please know that I will be working with council to identify the funding sources that are appropriate. So if there are potentials for developers to help to pay for those replacements, we're going to pursue that. If there are other funding sources that we have access to or grants that we can get, we're going to pursue that to not have the burden be on the taxpayer, ideally. But we're going to cobble together the money that is needed to make this right. And so I want to make sure that you hear that directly from council. You know, Sarah's accurate. We're all here to do what we can to make this better.
Okay, thank you. And one request, could you mail out the survey to us in the Timbers? Because a lot of people won't see it, if possible.
I did hear that request and I thank you for seconding it. I will have to look at the costs of mailing and to how many homes, but I will absolutely look into that. Alternatively, if anybody specifically wants one mailed to their house, they can absolutely call us. We will do individual mailings at request. However, I will continue to look, I promise tomorrow's busy, but on Monday, by end of day Monday, I will have costs for how much that would look like, and I will analyze that. Absolutely.
Hey, Sarah, this is Balu. Is there a web link for it, survey, or it has to be mailed physically?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your questions?
Is there a link?
Oh,
Yeah.
The surveys, I apologize, I ran out of time today, are not live. They will be live tomorrow before I go home. I'll make that commitment. I will not go home until it's done. We have the surveys created. We just have to get them uploaded now online and then get those links public and update the website and push all of those links out. If you want to make sure that you don't miss it, email parks@lakestevenswa.gov. I will reply with a direct link so that you don't miss it, but it will be on the website tomorrow before I go home, which will be at 5 p.m.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
and Sue Fernald.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sue Fernald. I've lived in Lake Stevens for 17 years. I am a grandmother with 4 grandkids, 2 of them living in Lake Stevens. I lived in a neighborhood before I recently moved that had a top part. It is not on the cut list, but I was part of the HOA turning it over to the city, so I understand this process. First, I want to say I've been involved with the council and the mayor as far as lack of communication in this city. A newsletter was started. I pick up 85 of them every month and I put them in my development. There's also some mailing list at the city of HOAs. I would suggest that you get the email of the president or whoever's in charge of the HOA and mail the survey out to them, who in turn can mail it to their residents. Because what I have found with the communication, and a couple people have mentioned it, people don't follow social media. They truly don't. They're tired of it. They don't have it. And I definitely can tell you that the grandparents aren't following it. So my concern is raising two grandsons who loved, their greatest thing every week was to come to grandma's house and play at the Tot Park. And I don't think this has been addressed, how healthy that is to go to the little local park. We had 85 homes to meet their friends every week because that's where they went to play with them. So by removing 4 or 5 of these parks, how many kids are you taking away? Also, I would suggest, and Angie was on, to go to the next 1 or 2 city council meeting and request emergency funding for the playground equipment to these parks that are you're going to take out. Because again, these people can't wait 1 or 2 years with their kids. These little parks have become the grounds where these kids go and play. Maybe the grandparents don't have a car to go down to Lundin or Frontier. They meet and play their little local park. So I think instead of figuring out when, how, that the immediate plan is replace the playground equipment at these 4 parks now and start the process instead of waiting until October with the budget. Then it has to be approved.
Marcus is blaring music out there.
Is it really?
Want you to know who I am.
Your mic. I'm sorry, please proceed with your.
That's my concern as a human side of it, and having 2 grandkids who are 18 and 14 at their very young age, playing in the little local park with the local kids that they walked home from school. And I'm sure these other 4 parks in the neighborhoods, some of the parents have spoke. This is their outside. This is where they are playing with their little neighborhood kids. Maybe their parents, maybe their grandparents are taking them Lundin, Frontier. Those are great parks. I love all the parks, but the little local park becomes their private, so to speak, playground to meet their friends after school. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I will be going down to City Hall to get that HOA list, and I appreciate the information and all of your comments.
We do have one gentleman that has tried to talk a couple times, so I do want to catch him. Is it Synthel? I may not be pronouncing your name correctly, but do you want to unmute yourself and ask any questions?
Yeah, actually, like now looks like DR Hatton built this park, but it's not meeting the requirement. Can city contact DR Hatton and get the fund?
She's trying to get the legal background so she can actually.
I am having conversations with them. We did have a on-site meeting as well as a virtual meeting so far, and we are talking to them. So thank you.
Hey, excuse me, this is Pavan again from Timbers. Just a quick minute. Would you involve any other members from DR Horton or Timbers when you are discussing with the DR Horton folks?
The meetings that we're having with all of the companies involved in the back end are not public. I am happy to come to the Timbers and do a meeting in person. We can do a hybrid one online. I have offered that. The day we shut this down, I had the community manager on the phone. I told him this was happening. I emailed him. I have talked to several of the members in the community, and I have also emailed the response of, we can have a meeting for your HOA. So I know the word, it sounds like, has not spread to everybody, but I can promise you I'm being proactive about this. I'm willing to be involved. I just did a 7 p.m. meeting from my house on Monday to make sure that I had that other HOA meeting. So get with your community, find out what date and time, where we're having the meeting, if it's hybrids, if it's in person. I absolutely will talk directly to the Oak and the Timber community.
Yeah, we will.
If you would like to have or if you have any questions, please raise your digital hand and then I can bring you in and answer your question. We do have someone waiting at the podium. Do you want to go ahead?
I appreciate the efforts in trying to brainstorm how to solve this problem. In terms of getting the word out, we've talked about mailers or letting the HOA know. Another resource that we might be able to tap into. I understand we have a fantastic Lake Stevens Youth Council. If we needed to do flyers or something like that, they might be able to help us with that endeavor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then PA1, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so we would be sending out an email, or I would be looping my HOA team, and we will be sending straight away that when we would be meeting in person, so that you can educate us on the discussions, what's happening with the DR Horton.
Yes, if you can just email that Parks email address, and we'll just have to look at my schedule and the HOA schedule and get something on the books. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else online that would like to raise their digital hand if they have any questions or comments?
Is there anybody else in the audience? So as a reminder, this is recorded. This is on YouTube. I'm sorry for the tech glitches, but it's all available. Our surveys will be out tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. That is all online. I can directly mail anybody that's interested. We will be working on options in order to get hard copies, because we understand not everybody is on the web. Not everyone cares about social media. It's also important that we learn how to best communicate with our public. So we promise to learn to adapt here at Parks. We need everybody to fill out surveys. We need you to come to meetings. This is how we decide parks. When we build parks, often the concept plans are done. Eagle Ridges was done 10 years ago. We just reopened it for last comments. We're reviewing those to go into engineering. Once we get into engineering, it's a little too late to start changing the concept. But these are things that we went through with Sunset Park. We'll have other parks coming up, and I beg you to be involved. We also once a month have a Parks Planning Board meeting. That is a fabulous place to come and learn. Look at the agendas, be involved. You can ask questions there as well. Those are people that live right here in Lake Stevens who have been appointed to the board and are here to represent you, the public, to make sure that you have what you need. They're a great body to push stuff through as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you for caring about playgrounds and parks.
Thank you.
It looks like Terry has a comment. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Terry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm still curious about the ADA issues at a couple of major parks. I know we visited in person with Sarah and Jill and Mayor Gailey at Eagle Ridge and discussed that the accessibility at Eagle Ridge is still not fixed. Is there a plan? Is there a deadline? Is there a budget?
Terry, I do remember meeting out there, and I had commented that there is no ramp going into the garden shed. Is that specifically what you're talking about with ADA or something else?
Correct.
Yes. So we are looking at the ramp. What we understand now is that a prior employee decided that that ramp would be removed. It was at one point there. The problem was that in order to meet true ADA at 1 inch per 1 foot, the ramp was too long and it went into the pathway. So I've now discovered why it was removed. So that helped me. It's not as simple as just replacing a ramp, because in order to get the 1 inch per 1 foot, we're going to intersect. So I believe that what we're going to be doing is providing alternate service at that location. And that's where, if you cannot physically ADA rules get into the garden shed, then you need to be able to access the same utility on the outside. So we are looking into that. And before the season starts, we will be addressing that. And I appreciate your bringing it up.
And then a suggestion on the survey to print it out and hand it out the food bank, the library, and have some kind of an area where people can pull those maybe from the visitor center, any of the city properties.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
I don't see anyone else online with their hand up, so I think with that we can adjourn.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.